Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeff Roten. So welcome to the fall edition of the Nature Connections webinar series from the Campbell Valley Nature House. So first of all, I just want to say that this webinar series is very graciously hosted by Pacific Parklands Foundation. And I'd like to introduce their Executive Director, Janet Antonio, to say a few words about the foundation.
Thank you, Jeff. And excited to be back here after our break over the summer and to say hello to everyone. It is also my privilege to start by acknowledging that the Nature House is on the ancestral homelands of the Coast Salish First Nations, and I wish to extend my appreciation for the opportunity to hold this webinar on their shared traditional territories. And we do appreciate all the support and from our First Nations communities, for sure. Just to tell you a little bit about the Pacific Parklands Foundation, we were founded 20 years ago, and our purpose is to support Metro Vancouver regional parks and to help people connect with nature through the parks, which is why this webinar series is such a great opportunity. So we raise funds and give grants to protect our parks and connect people to nature. And in fact, VARC, which is presenting today, is one of the recipients that we have funded this year. And we helped to fund actually an eco toilet, which was a very unique experience. And I've also had the opportunity to go out there with our camping program, which is Catching the Spirit, to see some of the work that they're doing. And it's a really inspiring I brought my 18-year-old daughter, and she had a chance to get out there and actually see a bird and hold a bird. And it was a really, really great program. So we're really excited to be able to support them and be here today. So thank you, Jeff, for hosting these and organizing them and finding these really inspiring and exciting speakers and programs. Thank you to the Nature Valley House, Campbell Valley Nature House, for partnering with us. And I'm looking forward to enjoying the presentation with Sherry. And that's over to you, Jeff. Thank you.
So today I'm very excited to welcome Sherry Ellenberger from the Vancouver Avian Research Centre, otherwise known as VARC, to talk about their work safeguarding our bird wildlife. So welcome, Sherry.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi. There you
Thanks for having me. We're really excited to partner with you guys today and be here today. So hi, everybody. Thank you for joining me. I'm really excited to go through this with you today. Let's take a look. So as Jeff said, my name is Sherry and I work with VARC. I'm the Special Projects Coordinator, and we're dedicated to safeguarding wild birds and their habitat. And we do that by three main ways: through research, conservation, and education. And today we're going to take a look at why birds are important, what the research is all about, the struggles that they're facing, and most especially what we can do to help. And there's a lot that we can do. And then at the end, as Jeff had mentioned, we're going to have a question and answer period. So hopefully if I don't cover what's in the presentation today, you'll be able to ask at the end. So why do birds matter? Well, birds matter because they have very important jobs in the ecosystem. For instance, our gardener birds, they help reduce weed growth by eating all the excessive seeds. Our pollinator birds, they provide us with fruit, crops, and wildflowers. Our seed spreaders, they eat fruits whole, and then they travel long distances dispersing the seeds throughout the land. So very important. Pest control birds. So these guys help protect food, crops, and native plants from overbearing insect populations. So they keep insects at bay like mosquitoes. Our scavenger birds. A lot of people might think they're gross, but they have a very important job. They reduce the spread of disease, and they're also recycling nutrients back into the environment. Our construction worker birds. So these guys build habitat and make food sources available for other animals that wouldn't necessarily have access to it. They make it accessible. Our ocean guardian birds are very important. They deposit their poop and nutrients into the water and surrounding soils, and they help to keep balance in the food chain. So very important. And mobile links, these guys are really important because they help move nutrients from one environment to another. So if we think about our bald eagle that's featured here, he might catch a fish in the ocean and take it back to the land to eat. Anything that he doesn't eat would fall to the ground, and then that turns into really important nutrients for the soil and for other species like insects and other animals. Why else do they matter? Well, we care about them. I hope that's why you're all here with me today. We find them beautiful and interesting and unique. A very beautiful bird that we have here in Canada, the Western Tanager. I'm going to play a little bit of his call here for you. So a lot of people might think that they have to travel to really exotic locations in order to be able to see bright and colorful birds, and it's just not the case. Canada has a plethora of really gorgeous and striking birds, and I definitely feel that the Western Tanager is one of them. It's also interesting because they can be very unique between the species as well, not just in their plumage, but in their personalities. One of my favorite birds down at the research station is the black-capped chickadee. I'm going to play some of his song here for you. What I love about the black-capped chickadees is all of the other birds, when we release them after we're done our research, they will take off. They're happy to leave us in their dust. The chickadees, however, will find the very nearest perch to sit at, and they'll yell at us and scream their displeasure at us before they do take off. So very unique. Why do we research birds? So part of the reason why we research birds is they're very easy to identify and monitor, especially compared to what it takes to be able to research other species. They're very economically important. So I know we just talked about some of the jobs that birds have. And if we think about it, the scavenger birds, for instance, are a good example of how they're economically important. If they didn't help to stop spread diseases, we could see a lot more pandemics than we see. And that definitely takes a toll, as we know, on our economy through cost and demand on the healthcare system, just as an example. They have very specialized habitat requirements. So we have even found at the research station that we are over the years catching the same birds in the exact same nets. That's how specialized they are with what they do. And we know a lot about them. So we're not starting from scratch with our research. We're able to dig in a lot further because we already know so much about them. And there's still, even with how much we do know, a lot that we are still discovering and trying to understand. And they're popular. I think everybody understands that if you have a cause that people care about, there's a lot more power behind the movement. So definitely helps. They place very high on the food chain and are very sensitive. So they're extremely sensitive to air quality, water quality, food quality, all the same things that we require. So it's pretty safe to say that if birds aren't doing well, we're not doing well either. They often will mirror many other species. So if we see a rise in insect population, we're probably going to see a rise in the insect eating birds. And adversely, if we see a decline in a lot of natural plant species, especially berries, we're going to see a decline in our seed spreader birds. And they're found everywhere. So this research is happening everywhere, and birds connect us, and they connect us through migration because they're not stuck to borders. And that is the research that we do at VARC. So through VARC, we do migration monitoring and bird banding. So what is migration? Well, migration is the seasonal movement that birds have every spring and fall, and they're moving these incredible distances to and from their breeding grounds. And they do it through navigation. And one of the ways they do it through navigation is polarized light. It's a light wave that can be seen and moves in very specific directions, so they can follow that. They're following the constellations, so when they're flying at night, they're looking at the stars. They also are able to tell northeast, southwest from Earth's magnetic field. And they're looking at landmarks. So this is another reason why part of what we do in our conservation is to try and preserve the land, also not only for them to live and to survive, but also the landmarks that is constantly changing. So if we look at a little bird here, this is our hummingbird, Rufous hummingbird. He travels from Alaska to Mexico every year, and he weighs the equivalent of 3 grams. So that's approximately 3 paper clips. So that's pretty incredible when you think about that journey that they are doing twice a year. Our bar-tailed godwit. This guy is amazing. He has the longest non-stop migration of any bird. He flies nonstop from Alaska to New Zealand. And because it's a non-stop journey, he's traveling at night and he can't rest. So what he does is he will turn off half of his brain so that he can continue to fly, but also sleep and regenerate. Absolutely incredible. And just to put it into perspective, that's an equivalent of a human being running at 70 kilometers an hour for over a week, that journey that he takes. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeff now. We've got a poll question for you.
Okay, so the next poll is up about bird migration. What is the longest songbird round trip migration? So you've got 5,000 kilometers, 10,000, 30, or 40. So get your votes in now.
And while Jeff is doing that, I'm going to play some birdie Jeopardy music for you here of the bird that it actually is for it.
So let's see, most people said 30,000 kilometers. What's the right answer?
Most people are absolutely correct. So the correct answer
Thank you.
is 30,000 kilometers. It's the longest known migration of any songbird. And that belongs to the northern wheatear, has that distinction. So he goes from Baffin Island in northeastern Canada and crosses to the Atlantic, crosses over the Atlantic and winters in Western Sub-Saharan Africa. So that is an incredible journey that this little bird takes. And how do we know all this incredible information? Well, through our migration monitoring and our research. So for VARC in Vancouver, our season runs from April until November. That's when we're going to have the highest amount of birds coming through our area. We capture the birds and we give them a band or a bracelet, if you will, if you'd like to think of it that way, that has a very specific serial number that's individual to them. And then all that information goes into an international database. And this international database is really incredible because it houses a lot of amazing information. And the information that we're getting from it are things like dispersal and migration trends, behaviors and social structures, lifespan and survival rates, reproductive success, and population success and growth. And those are only some of the things that we can tell from all this research. We do our research at Colony Farm Park in Coquitlam, BC. And because birds are most active first thing in the morning, so at dawn or at dusk, it's very early mornings for us. This is a picture that I took at 4 a.m. We're out there to open the station before sunrise because that is going to be our highest rate of capture. And how do we do that capturing? Well, we use mist nets. So this is a picture of a mist net that is closed. We keep it closed, or what we say furled, when we're either not using them or when we're not there, so that nothing can get caught in them or get stuck. And this is a picture of it unfurled. So I'm hoping that you can hardly see it. And that is part of the reason why we like to use them, is because the birds can't see them either and they will fly into them. They're very soft and billowy, so it's not harmful to the bird at all. And we use 40 nets. So we have 40 of them set up at Colony Farm Park. And this is just another photo that you can see a little bit better of what the net looks like. You can kind of see there's like these pockets in them, and the bird will fly in and get caught in these pockets. So once the bird is caught in the pocket, it's time for our extractors to come along. So everybody at the station when we're working has a very specific job that they've been trained to do. So the extractors are up first. And what they do is they take the birds gently and carefully out of the nets. So they've had very specific training to do this, because our first and foremost priority with everything we do at VARC is the safety and the well-being of the birds. So we've got a couple birds here. This is what it looks like when they're entangled in the nets. And then they're going to put them individually into soft, breathable bags. Why do we do this? Well, we do this because it actually helps them to feel safe, and it gives them a chance to relax. They actually like being in the bags. Well, they don't like being in the bags, but it gives them that opportunity to relax and feel safe and calm down from the experience. And here we have some bags up on the pole. Each bag that the extractors have is given a peg, and that tells us exactly what net they came from. All the nets are numbered. And then they're brought back to the banding station. So here you can see birds that have been taken from the nets on a round, and they've been put on here so that they can be separated and are not on top of each other. But what happens if we have birds that are either too big or too small for a bag? Well, they get a very special birdie straitjacket. These straitjackets just allow us the opportunity to keep them safe and protected while we're doing our research, so that they can't flap around and flop around and potentially hurt themselves. Because again, we really care about their safety and well-being. So what is the banding? So here you can see with our purple finch right on his foot, so that's called the tarsus, that's actually a foot, not the ankle, of the bird is where we put the bands, and they have a serial number engraved into them. So once the extractors bring them to the station, the banders will take over, and the banders are the ones that handle the birds and do all the research and taking all the data sets. So they're gently removed from the bag, and we identify the species. And the reason why we want to make sure we know what species it is because every bird has a different size tarsus. The bands are light and loose and made of aluminum, so they don't interfere with their flying, and they don't rust either. So it's time for another poll question here for everyone.
Okay, so how many species of birds do you think VARC has caught at the banding station? 12, 36, 63, 99. I'm going to post the results. I forget the answer to this one. So
wow, everybody's so great at this.
I'm
excited.
Okay.
You know their stuff. So the answer is definitely 99. We cannot seem to crack that number 100. We've been sitting at 99 different species identified just in that one tiny little park. So pretty amazing. Just to give you a little bit of a closer look here, we had some visitors at the banding station, and so the researchers are just showing them how to identify the bird. You can see on the table here some of our equipment, and those things that look like necklaces, those are actually strings with each individual band on them in numerical order, and they're according to size. So again, once we know what the bird is, we know what size of band to give them, and then we can just remove it from the string to put on the bird. And in behind those bands, you can kind of see cut off there is the scribe. The scribe is also a very important job at the station. While the banders are working on the birds, they're calling out the information to the scribe, who is the one who's putting it into the international database. Here we have a bander who's working with a common yellow throat, and this is some of the equipment that we use to put the bands on the bird. And then this is just a really close-up version of it, so you can see the bands have an opening at one side, so we open them up and we're able to put it over their foot, and then we close it up. So very special pliers there. So once we have the band on, we want to take all the biometrics. So that's just a fancy way of saying the information. So we're looking at wing lengths, tail lengths, the foot, the beak. We're also looking for fat deposits. So this is a display of fat areas that you can find on a bird. It's on the underside of the bird. That can tell us a lot. And we also want to weigh them. We want to find out how much they are in weight. Cool fact about hummingbirds, this little guy here on the scale didn't need to have a straight jacket because unless they're actually perched onto something, their legs are so short they have a hard time pushing off to take off. So sometimes we can even put them on the scale without their little straight jacket on and they can't get away. We also want to take a look at whether they're male or female, and we want to see how old they are. So we've got some Wilson warblers here. These guys are what we call sexually dimorphic, which means that there's a difference in the plumage from male to female once they've matured. So sometimes it's really, really easy for us to tell that. And this handsome little fellow down in the corner sporting that very interesting toupee, that's the male. And then the female, as you can see, is similar, but very, very different in her markings. And sometimes it's also really easy for us to tell the age of the bird based on other things such as loose and fluffy feathers in the babies. These are two babies here. We can see duller eye color. We can see, less markings. And you can also see, if you look at the house finch, this is a really great photo because it really illustrates the gape as well. Often birds will have a gape that is swollen and colorful. And that's the area where it looks like the beak is almost turning into lips. But what happens if we don't really know if they're not sexually dimorphic or there aren't very obvious signs? We can use a lot of other techniques to be able to tell the age and the sex of a bird. One of them is through skull ossification. So that's where a skull fuses and grows over time on a bird. So we can look and see where it is in its development to give us an indication. We can also look at different characteristics for birds to see if they're sexually mature. So for the males, and I'm going to try to get this right, I struggle every time I say it, cloacal protuberance is what it's called, and that's what we look for in the males to see if they're mature. And on the females, you can blow on their chest to see if they have evidence of a brood patch, and that allows them to be able to keep the eggs warm. And then probably the most technical aspect of all of the research that we do is learning how to read a wing. So for an example, I've got some different pictures of different lazuli buntings. And these are the tail and wing is what we look at to find very detailed information about age and sex. So this big one here is a perfect example of what we look at in the wings. If you can see the difference here between that nice rich black and the bright white and the blue compared to the feathers that are duller and brown and don't really have much marking on them, it's one of the things that we can do to indicate the difference between a mature bird and a younger bird. So the mature bird is the bright blue, white, and black, and the younger feathers are these duller ones. Here we've got a researcher blowing on the underside of a bird, and she could be looking for sexual characteristics or fat deposits. This is another way in which we're able to weigh the birds. So it's a double-ended tube that we just slide them into, and we're able to get them out the other side once we're done weighing them. And then the cedar waxwings, these guys are really cool. With some birds, we'll take extra special information. So all birds, we're taking all that information. But the cedar waxwings is an example of a bird that we're taking different information. They have these red waxy tips that are on the remiges of their wings. And they're generally age-related and help us to age and sex. But the exact function of these little tips, these unique tips, are not known. We think it's to do with finding a mate, but still not sure. And it's an example of some of the stuff that we still don't know about birds. And so we've been studying those and taking information about those as an example. And usually 7 to 9 waxy tips can be found on each wing, generally speaking, for most birds. And then we let them go. And that's the end of the actual research with the bird. Oh, sorry here. So I've got a question for you guys. If you just want to put it in the chat box here, what you think, and Jeff, if you could let me know, from the time that we take the bird out of the net and put them in the bags to the time that we let them go, how many minutes approximately, or how much time do you think it takes us to be able to do that? So it actually takes us between 3 to 5 minutes.
Wow,
So
okay.
very, very minimal amount of time we want to spend with the birds. We want to keep the stress levels for them down as much as possible. So that's why there's so much training and work that goes into getting people into the roles that they have. And why do we even want to put them through the stress to begin with? And this is why, because they are in trouble. Our birds are in trouble, and nearly 3 billion birds have been lost since 1970 here in North America, and that's not even a worldwide stat, unfortunately. The status of world birds are still deteriorating, and unfortunately our Pacific and ocean-going seabirds are declining the fastest. And globally, a lot of birds are facing extinction. So we've got another poll question here for you guys.
So how many species of birds are globally threatened with extinction? Choose your answer. 112, 963, 1200, or 1469. So most people said 1469.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is not even, I'm not sure that's the most updated number, but that is how many species around the world are facing extinction. So our birds are definitely in trouble, and they're facing a lot of difficulties, and really the biggest impact they're facing is from us, from our behavior. So we've got a few pictures up here. We've got Mexico City, where you can see nearly every natural habitat, scrap of natural habitat has been removed. This is a picture somewhere in BC of clear-cut logging. And then, of course, the other two pictures, we can see some devastating effects of garbage and plastic pollution. So air pollution, something that they're very, very sensitive to. Sound pollution, so birds sing and call to each other to find mates, to warn each other or defend territory, or to express joy, excitement. And noise can interfere with their really complex forms of communication. It's very interesting. A lot of scientists noticed that during the earlier lockdown stages of the pandemic, that birds were actually changing and adding a wider range of songs and calls to their repertoire. And I think that was actually directly related to the fact that there was less noise pollution to compete with. Light pollution. So as we learned in their navigation, they rely on stars to navigate, and obviously in the cities or around the surrounding city areas, it's very hard to see the stars with light. Also confuses them at nighttime as well. Loss of landmarks. So we're constantly changing our landscape, and they're losing their touchstone places to know where they are in their journeys. Plastic pollution, I cannot stress how big of a deal plastic pollution is. Loss of habitat, and of course that also affects their food supply and their water supply. Fresh water being a major issue everywhere, for everyone, for every species. So what's the good news about all of this? The bright side of it is that because we are the problem, we're also the solution. So these are just a very few of the things that any one of us, depending on our situation, can easily implement today to help birds. So first of all, if you want to see birds in your backyard, either double, triple, quadruple, you want to make fresh water available to them, and just make sure it's recycled water or fresh water and not stagnant, because not only is it going to attract mosquitoes, but it can make them sick. Same goes for fresh food. Want to make sure that it's food that's native to the area, so it's giving them the nutrients that they need. And with hummingbird feeders especially, you want to be changing that up and cleaning it out at least once a week, and try to do it without any soaps or chemicals, because they're very sensitive to it. Providing shelter, just try to put it somewhere where it's going to be a little bit more private for them, or not in a very busy spot, so that they are not stressed. Planting native species. So this is a huge one. We've lost so much natural habitat, and manicured and empty lawns are probably one of the biggest wastes of natural space possible. So we want to plant native species. And again, the reason why we want to do that is not only to help native species, but also because it gives them the specific nutrients that they need. And of course, if you're helping birds, you're also helping a lot of other species as well, like bees and butterflies that are also struggling. To prevent window strikes, a really great thing to put up are chimes or mobiles. The movement and the sound seems to keep the birds at bay. On leash and on path. So I know when a lot of us are outdoor people and we like to be outside, but many birds make their nests on the ground and we don't see them until we're right on top of them. So staying on leash and staying on path is a really big thing that we can do. Then of course we have our lovely little kitty cats. They are such good hunters that there's actually some research that shows they have an astronomically devastating effect on wild birds. And so keeping them inside is not only great for the birds, but helps them to prevent from getting sick or ill. Switching off. So we want to switch off because light pollution interrupts their navigation, but switching also helps to conserve energy, which is a big strain on the environment. And we can help offset this by using energy efficient products like light bulbs or cars. Speaking of cars, research has also shown the effects of drive-throughs, and the amount of air pollution that comes from idling your car at drive-throughs is crazy. So we can make the choice to park our car and go in. Stopping plastic use. We can also choose to stop using plastics, especially single-use plastics. The Canadian government has dedicated to end single-use plastics by 2021. So another thing that we can do to help encourage that is to write our MP. We want to write and hold our government accountable to making sure they are fighting for conservation, fighting for the environment. If you find your local MP is not that interested, we want to make sure when voting time comes that we're voting for people that are going to make a difference. And then of course, between elections, we can volunteer. So we can work for people or help groups that are already making a difference. And then I know it's a little bit difficult with the pandemic right now for that, especially if we go through another wave of it. So donating can also help those same charities that you know and trust. And we're gonna take it out with our Eastern Kingbird.
Great. So first of all, there was one question already from someone asking about the international database, and they were wondering, is that database available to the general public?
I believe that it is. If you go to our website, you can see that information about the database. I've never gone on it personally myself, I'm sad to say, other than to input information or to look at it that way. So I believe it's available to the public, but I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, and again, everybody just type in your questions anywhere if you have any questions. I have a couple, so I'm going to start off. So first of all, you mentioned providing fresh water, and I'm wondering in what format. So how would you
A
provide
lot of
fresh
people will,
water to birds?
yeah, absolutely. So a lot of people will put in water baths, which
Mhm.
again, if you're going to have something that it's just still water, you want to be cleaning it out regularly, if not daily, to make sure that it's fresh. So we're not attracting mosquitoes or making anybody sick. But a lot of people will put in fountains or water features that way as well. So the birds, like even if it's just one of those little ones you can get at Canadian Tire that you plug in, they will flock to it and use it because it is so hard to find fresh water throughout most of Canada.
Okay, so a few questions are coming in here. So one, is there a reason that bags on the extraction slide place so close to each other?
That what, sorry?
So the bags, I guess the bags that you hold the birds in, that
Oh,
they were close to one another, and I guess this person was wondering if there's a reason for that.
yeah, if it seemed that they were close together. So through the season, in a day, regulations state that the banding station can only be open for 6 hours. So we start from first thing in the morning until about noon, and then we stop. And during the season, at the high peak of the season, we're processing hundreds of birds. So that's during a busy part of the day where we have quite a lot of birds. Now, thankfully, we also have a lot of banders who are helping with that. So the birds are not there very long, but that was at a moment where we had quite a lot of birds coming in.
So I'm going to follow up before I get to some other questions because there are a few that have come in. So how many birds would you band in a typical, morning then?
Yeah, so typically the beginning of the season might be a little bit slow and the end of the season might be a little bit slow, but in the peak we're sometimes 200 and some odd birds a day.
Wow. Okay. That's incredible. So let's see. The next question is, are you able to contact other countries such as Mexico if there's a problem with, say, meadowlarks becoming scarce?
I know that a lot of researchers and a lot of different banding stations are connected. Often we have banders that will actually visit other countries to do banding with those other stations. So definitely they are in contact with each other. One of the things that I did want to mention related to this, and also going back to the question about whether the database is open to people, you can add part of the work that we do. We can recapture birds. And when we recapture them, we can see all the information that was in there. But a huge thing that has been a blessing for banding and the research are photographers or even backyard birders. They're able to take pictures of these birds in their backyard, and through Zoom, they can zoom in and get the number off of the band. And you can actually put those numbers into or submit them to the database. Trying to think of what the actual number is, and or like the website call for it is, and I apologize. But you can put those numbers in, and then that alerts everybody who's ever captured that bird or put information in about that bird, or the people that abandoned them, get a notification to find out where that bird was seen or where they were caught at another banding station. So definitely there's a lot of communication happening around the world, and even working with each other and visiting each other's stations.
Great. Okay, I've got a couple of questions. One that just came in here, which I think is a good one, is can they volunteer on this activity?
They can, yes.
If you'd like
We
to.
are always looking for volunteers. Now, the one thing I will say is it does take some dedication, because there's a lot to learn, but most people are welcome to come out and start with us. Scribing is usually where most people will start, because it's fairly easy to know where to put the information and write down the information, or to shadow for a while. We also do offer training if you want to start advancing and going through to learn a lot more of the technical stuff to do the actual holding of the birds, because I think it's also special that we are able to be so close to them, and people that love birds love being that up close and personal with them, to see them in that kind of detail. But it's a lot of work and dedication because we're out there so early. So it's usually a Saturday morning. So we're going out 4 times a month. If weather is bad, then we might go out on a Sunday, but once a month. But you're looking at, you need to be there before the sun comes up. So if you can handle that, then you're welcome to come out, and we're always looking for people to help. It can also help with donations as well. We're going to shortly be putting stuff up on our website of ways that people can donate certain items or things as well to help that way.
Another question here is, say more about what's negatively impacting seabirds, and is that in all the oceans or mostly 1 or 2?
All the oceans, unfortunately. It's a worldwide issue. The biggest thing being plastic pollution. If you could see in the picture that I showed of that bird who had passed away, that its stomach was just engorged and filled with all those plastics. That is probably one of the biggest issues. Overfishing is also contributing to our species loss. Oil spills and things like that can also contribute. Temperature rising, pretty much everything that a lot of us are familiar with, that we hear a lot about that affect other species, it's the same thing that's affecting the birds. But I would say overfishing and plastic pollution is the biggest contributor.
I have another question. So I was recently in Strathcona Provincial Park in Forbidden Plateau a couple of weeks ago. And at my campsite, we were doing some backcountry camping. There were a lot of whiskey jacks, but they actually, and all of them had multiple bands. So
Amazing.
I'm curious
Great.
about the multiple bands.
Yes. So there are different colored bands. I'm not as familiar with all the research that goes into the colored bands. I'm assuming some of them were colored.
Yeah, they were all different. So one actually had like one whiskey jack we saw had 2 on one leg and 1 on the other, and they were different colored. Yes.
Yeah. So those denote different types of research that's happening, and to follow them. If you're interested in that, I would definitely suggest reaching out to our info@birdvancouver.com. And Derek, who is the expert on all things birds and all things banding, would definitely be able to share some really incredible information with you about that. But those are very specialized ones that are denoting slightly different information and different research that's happening.
Cool. Okay, I have another question that just came in here. Are there other countries that have a high level of conservation for birds? Well, actually, there's 2 parts. That's the first part of that question. Yeah. Other countries, do you know that
Yeah,
are?
I do know of one country that's been making incredible conservation efforts is Costa Rica.
Hmm,
I think per capita or per square mile or whatever it is, they have the highest protected conservation area of land compared to any other country last time I checked.
cool. And next question, next part was, when did VARC start banding?
They've been going for over a decade. So Derek and Carol, who started FARC, they've been banding and birding for many, many years with other groups, but they branched out and started their own over a decade ago. So we've been collecting this research in Colony Farm for that long now. So we're starting to learn a lot about what happens there.
So one person here is asking, will they see more events with you, and how can they reach out to you?
So absolutely, we do have one of the big things that we're trying to push right now. The 3 main aspects that we do is research, conservation, and of course, education. So if you are interested in learning more, again, if you can go to our website, but we are working on and have been offering some educational programs for younger audiences, for older audiences, different types of themes. And we also are, if you're not keen about necessarily making the dedication to volunteer, we do have visitor programs as well. So you can come down to the station and come visit us there and see firsthand. And there's also the opportunity when you do visit us to be able to hold a bird and release it as well. So always exciting.
Those visits are still happening during COVID then?
Yes, we're just making it very, very few people at a time. So you want to reach out to us and set it up. We're not accepting people if they just show up. So just make sure to organize this with us first. But definitely we're having people down. But of course, following protocols, you want to make sure you've got mask and everything else. And we're still observing it with as much as we can with the distancing.
And I was at the banding station one Saturday morning a couple of years ago and was offered the opportunity to hold a bird, but I was too nervous that I was going to crush it.
Squish it.
Everybody else did, but I couldn't do it. So here's a question here. How many birds has VARC banded over the years? Do you have a number?
That is a good question. I don't even know if I would hazard a guess. I would definitely say at least in the thousands of thousands, but it's going to be a lot.
We have another, let's see, comment here. For people in and near Richmond who want to volunteer, there's also a bird banding station at Iona Beach Regional Park.
Yes.
It's Wild Research.
Yep.
So if you live in or near Reach, yeah, so that's, thanks for that, Teresa.
If you're joining us from anywhere else in Canada as well, I mean, pretty much everywhere you find birds, you can find a banding station. You may have to travel a little bit, but even in Toronto, in downtown Toronto, they have a banding station where they do migratory monitoring and banding. So even if you're in the city, if you're elsewhere in the country, there's different ways to get involved with banding stations near you.
What's the biggest bird you banded?
So we have been able to catch some owls and some hawks over the years. So I would say definitely they have been the biggest birds. One of the first big birds that I was able to help with the banding was a Cooper's hawk. But because they're so big, they usually they're usually not flying that low to get caught in the nets, and they're usually too strong that they either can tear through them or they just kind of take off. They don't really get caught in the metal like the little birds do. But owl does a lot of bird banding as well. And they're local to the Vancouver area, and they look after the larger and raptor birds.
So something that you mentioned at the very beginning was that birds return to exactly the same site, which I thought was really interesting.
Yes.
And I guess I'm assuming that gives you the opportunity so that you will catch birds that you've banded and you can check up on. That gives you an opportunity because they're going to fly through the same spot.
You got it. Like I said, even sometimes to the exact same net.
Right.
And these nets they're all in this one tiny section of Colony Farm, and they're very close to each other. So the fact that they're being caught in the exact same net is pretty incredible to how specific that they are in their behaviors. But we call them recaptures. And all that information goes into adding. It helps us double check to make sure we were correct in our aging and our sexing. And sometimes we're able to see, have they sustained any injuries? Do they show signs of any diseases at all? So it helps us understand over time how they're surviving and the quality of their survival and where they're headed as well.
Really, thanks, Jerry. That was awesome.
Thank you very much.
Really informative. I'm going to try and share a final screen here just with some, let's see if this works. There we go. Okay. So you can see here, if you want to get in touch with Pacific Parklands Foundation, there's their website, Metro Vancouver, and of course, VARC. You've had your website up there. So I just really want to thank you again, Sherry. This was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Really interesting. And again, thanking Pacific Parklands Foundation again for hosting this webinar. Yeah. So thank you so much, Sherry. Thanks for Janet and everybody. Have a great the rest of the day, and everybody stay safe.